My name is Rachel Morrison, 32 years old. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in half a year, so when her number flashed across my phone screen, my first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. But something in me, habit maybe, made me swipe to answer. Rachel, honey, Mom cooed, her tone so syrupy it nearly stuck in my ear. I'm calling to invite you to our Christmas party this year. Isn't that wonderful? The false cheer made my stomach knot. My family never reached out unless they wanted something. Christmas party? I repeated, my voice deliberately flat. Oh, yes, everyone will be there. Your aunts, uncles, cousins. And Hannah really wants to see you too. You two should spend more time together. You're sisters, after all. At the mention of my older sister's name, Hannah, my throat tightened. Hannah and I had never been close. In fact, the last time we spoke, it ended with her accusing me of hoarding my own house like some greedy dragon. I don't know, Mom, I said slowly. It's been a while. Oh, but you have to come. Her voice dropped into the maternal guilt register. I'm making all your favorite dishes. You remember the chicken casserole you loved when you were little? And we're even bringing out Grandma's porcelain set, the one we only use for big holidays. I froze. Grandma's porcelain. That set had only ever been used for weddings and milestone events. The last time I saw those fragile plates was at my cousin's wedding 3 years ago. If Mom was dusting them off now, it wasn't just for a party. Something was up. All right, I murmured after a long pause. I guess I can come. Perfect, she chirped too quickly. Christmas Eve at 6. Don't bring anything, just yourself. When the call ended, I sat staring at my phone, a sick unease creeping up my chest. My family didn't go out of their way for anyone unless they expected a return on investment. This sudden warmth meant one thing. They were setting a trap. I needed to know what kind. That night, I opened Facebook and typed in Hannah Whitmore Sanders. My sister had always loved an audience, so her page was public. Sure enough, the answer was right there in pixelated evidence. Photos of moving boxes stacked to the ceiling of her apartment, Emma's toys labeled in messy black marker, kitchen scrawled across another box. In the comments, her friend Jessica had asked, "What's going on?" Hannah replied, "We're moving soon. It'll be a surprise for everyone." My lips curled in a bitter smile, subtle as ever. Scrolling further, I found another post. Hannah asking about schools near my neighborhood. A mom friend had commented, "The elementary by Rachel's Street is great. Small classes, excellent teachers." That's great to know, Hannah had replied. Emma might be going there next semester. I screenshotted everything, leaned back in my chair, and let out a short, disbelieving laugh. They thought they were clever, plotting behind my back, assuming I'd cave like always. But there was one detail they didn't know. 6 months ago, I'd sold that house. I'd packed up quietly, accepted a transfer to our Colorado branch, and bought myself a smaller, cozier place. Lower mortgage, better pay, and, best of all, distance from the constant gravitational pull of my family's entitlement. I hadn't told them because, frankly, why would I? We barely spoke anyway. Now, though, keeping that secret felt like divine providence. They thought they had me cornered. They had no idea they were building their whole scheme on sand. For the next 2 weeks, I rehearsed every possible scenario in my head. Mom suddenly announcing Hannah's surprise move. Dad guilt-tripping me about family values. Hannah weeping dramatically about Emma needing a yard. I imagined the smug looks, the pointed toasts, the unspoken expectation that I'd surrender what was mine. Each fantasy ended the same, me smiling sweetly while holding back the truth like a sharpened knife. Christmas Eve arrived, cold and gray. As I drove the 5 hours back to my hometown, I caught myself clenching the steering wheel too tightly, the knuckles of my hands white. The radio played soft carols, but the words felt hollow against the drum of my heart. My parents' house looked unchanged. The crooked wreath on the door, the sagging Christmas lights Dad never bothered to fix. It was like stepping into a snow globe I'd outgrown years ago. Inside, the air was thick with roasted meat, cinnamon, and too many voices talking over each other. 15 people, at least. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and of course Hannah, radiant in her element, holding Emma on her hip, her husband Mike at her side like a loyal shadow. "Rachel!" Mom shrieked like I'd just returned from war. She pulled me into a crushing hug, announcing to the room, "Doesn't she look wonderful, everyone?" A chorus of nods and perfunctory compliments followed. Even Hannah gave me a hug, which was unusual enough to set off alarm bells of its own. We weren't huggers. Dinner was chaos. Kids darted between chairs. Relatives shouted across the table, and the clatter of dishes filled every pause. But underneath the noise, there was something else, a hum of expectation, eyes flicking toward me, like they were all waiting for their cue. I forced a smile, spooned mashed potatoes onto my plate, and said little. Every time Hannah laughed too loudly or Mom refilled my glass unprompted, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. This wasn't dinner, it was theater, and I was the target audience. As dessert approached, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. Dad tapped his glass with a fork, the room falling eerily quiet. "Everyone," he said, his chest puffed like a king making a proclamation. "I have an announcement." All chatter died, even the children hushed, sensing the weight in his voice. I gripped my fork, the metal biting into my palm. "Here it comes." Dad stood at the head of the table, fork poised against his wineglass, a smile stretching across his weathered face. My relatives leaned in, expectant, eyes bright as if this moment had been rehearsed in secret. "As you all know," he began, his voice loud enough to drown out the hum of the heating vents, "Hannah and her family have been renting that small apartment for the past few years." I kept my face blank, my fork unmoving over my plate. My chest was a fist. "Well, we've decided as a family," he paused, sweeping the room with a theatrical glance, "that it's time for them to have more space." And then the hammer dropped. "Next week, Hannah, Mike, and Emma will be moving into Rachel's house. Isn't that wonderful?" For a moment, silence hung heavy, like the air before a thunderclap. Then it erupted. Applause, cheers, laughter. My aunts clapped, cousins grinned. Uncle Greg slapped the table with approval. Across from me, Hannah pressed trembling fingers to her lips, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, voice cracking with delight. She turned to me, beaming through her fake crying. "Can you believe it, Rachel? Emma will finally have a real yard." Mike clasped Dad's hand in a firm shake, nodding with the solemnity of a man who had just closed a lucrative deal. Little Emma bounced up and down in her chair, squealing, "A new room! A new room!" All eyes swung toward me. The room's energy surged against me, pressing, demanding, waiting for me to seal the deal with a smile and a yes. I felt my heartbeat thunder in my ears. My nails dug crescents into my palm beneath the tablecloth. And then, very slowly, I let a smile spread across my face. "That's wonderful," I said, my voice light, almost cheerful. Relief crashed through the room like a wave. My mother sighed dramatically, clutching her chest as though she'd been worried all along. "See, I told you she'd understand." The tension broke and the chatter resumed, except now every word buzzed with celebration. "You'll need to prepare the bedrooms this week," Mom said, as if this were a minor errand. "Hannah and Mike can take your master bedroom, and Emma can have the guest room. You don't mind sleeping on the couch for a while, do you?" My smile held. "Of course not," I said. Inside, I bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek I tasted iron. Conversation turned giddy, almost manic. Hannah leaned toward me, voice syrupy. "Rachel, you have no idea how much this means to us. Mike and I were so worried. We thought you'd say no." I tilted my head, meeting her eyes. "Why would I say no? Family comes first, right?" Her shoulders loosened, her grin widening. "Exactly. You've always been so independent. I wasn't sure you'd understand." I let out a small laugh, though it sounded wrong even to me. "I understand perfectly." Around the table, my aunts chimed in. "So generous of you. Such a good sister. Emma's so lucky." Each word was another rope tightening around me. I barely touched my apple pie. Every bite stuck in my throat like sawdust. Mike started explaining his plans for the commute. "It'll add maybe 20 minutes to my drive, but it's worth it for Emma's education. That school near Rachel's place has excellent ratings." Hannah clasped my hand across the table, squeezing tightly. "And think of how nice it'll be, Rachel. We'll finally be together again. Emma will grow up so close to her auntie. Isn't that what you always wanted?" I forced myself to squeeze back. "That sounds perfect." My cousin whispered to her husband not quietly enough. "See? She's finally making herself useful." The words pierced, but I kept my mask in place. If anything, their smugness fueled the fire building in my chest. After dinner, Hannah pulled me aside into the hallway. The Christmas tree lights glowed over her shoulder, reflecting in her carefully mascaraed eyes. "You don't know how much this means to us," she said, her voice dropping into a confessional tone. "Emma deserves better than that cramped little place we had. She deserves space, a proper home. And honestly," she leaned closer, "it's not like you really needed all that space for yourself, did you?" My smile stayed plastered on even as my jaw ached from the effort. No, I suppose not. Her relief was palpable. She hugged me again, and I stood stiff in her arms. Back in the living room, I sat quietly while Mom fussed over the seating chart for Christmas morning, while Dad and Mike toasted to new beginnings, while Hannah accepted congratulations as though she had earned some grand prize. Not once did anyone think to ask how I felt. Not once did anyone consider that it was still my house, at least in their minds. But that was the beauty of it. They were so blinded by their triumph, so convinced of their clever manipulation, that none of them noticed the storm behind my eyes. Later that night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, the same wallpaper peeling at the corners, the same creak in the headboard. I stared at the ceiling, hands folded across my stomach. A small voice whispered in the dark, "Maybe you should just tell them. End it now." But another voice, colder, sharper, rose stronger. "No. Let them keep celebrating. Let them pack their boxes, make their plans, imagine their future in a house that isn't yours anymore. Let them walk right into it." I closed my eyes, a smile flickering across my lips in the dark. "I almost feel bad," I murmured into the silence. Almost. I slipped out the next morning, leaving behind the smell of Mom's coffee and Dad's booming voice discussing moving schedules. My parents thought I was heading back to my house to start clearing space for Hannah's family. Instead, I steered my car toward the interstate, past city limits, the familiar landscape shrinking in the rearview mirror. The road stretched endlessly before me, a gray ribbon leading west toward the life I'd quietly built months ago. As the miles unspooled, so did the memories. I remembered Hannah's first visit to my old house, her eyes narrowing as she walked through each room. "So much space for one person," she'd said, her tone dripping with faux innocence. "Doesn't it feel lonely?" Later, at a family barbecue, I overheard her muttering to Mom, "It's really unfair Rachel gets that whole house. Houses are meant for families, not single people." The pattern had been obvious in hindsight. Every family dinner, every gathering, Hannah managed to wedge in a comment about my house. "That school district is so perfect for kids. Emma would love a backyard like this. It just makes sense for families to have this kind of space." At first, I'd brushed it off. But then came the company's offer of a transfer, a chance at freedom. And in 2 whirlwind weeks, I'd sold the house, packed my belongings, and left without a backward glance. Now, as I crossed state lines, I couldn't help but smirk. My family's entire scheme was crumbling before it even began. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my cozy Colorado home, a winter sun was setting behind the mountains. I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, my phone rang so violently it nearly slid off the table. Mom's name glared on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What the hell is going on?" she shrieked. I held the phone away from my ear. "Good morning to you too, Mom. There are strangers in your house. They're saying it's theirs. They threatened to call the police on us." Her voice cracked like glass. "Oh, that," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. "Those are the new owners. I sold the house 6 months ago." Silence. Then a strangled gasp. "This is impossible. You can't just sell it without telling anyone." "Actually," I said, "I can. It was mine to sell." There was rustling, then Dad's gruff voice thundered through the line. "You deliberately abandoned your family. You moved without telling us. You've disgraced us, Rachel." My jaw tightened. "If you'd bothered to call me more than twice a year, you'd have known. But you didn't. And this circus you tried to pull is exactly why." I hung up before he could answer. The phone lit up again seconds later, this time Hannah. "You did this on purpose," she screamed before I could even say hello. "You set us up. We gave notice to our landlord, Rachel. We have nowhere to go. Emma has nowhere to go." "That sounds like a you problem," I said evenly. "A me problem?" she shrieked. "Emma is your niece. Do you even care that she's crying right now? That she's scared? We planned everything around moving into your house. You're destroying her childhood." "Funny," I said. "I thought her parents were the ones gambling her stability on a house they never asked permission to live in." Hannah's sobs turned into furious gasps. "You're heartless. Family doesn't treat each other like this." "No," I snapped, my voice finally breaking its calm mask. "Family doesn't plot behind someone's back, doesn't set them up in front of 15 witnesses, doesn't try to steal their home." The silence on the other end was thick, broken only by Hannah's shaky breathing. "You'll regret this," she whispered. Then the line went dead. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Within the hour, calls started flooding in. Aunt Carol, her voice syrupy with false concern. Rachel, honey, your poor mother is hysterical. Your sister has a little girl. Don't you think you could have compromised? I gritted my teeth. Compromise? They wanted to move into a house I no longer own. There was nothing to compromise. Don't be selfish, Carol scolded, her tone hardening. Emma needs stability. You could have at least warned them. I hung up without another word. Next came Cousin Brad. Dude, what's wrong with you? Hannah's got nowhere to live. Do you want Emma to freeze in the streets this winter? Hyperbolic much? I said. There are thousands of rentals in that city. They'll survive. They don't have the deposit saved, he snapped. They spent everything on moving supplies. Again, I said, not my problem. He cursed and hung up. The guilt trips, the lectures, the emotional blackmail, they came in waves. Each call carried a new flavor of accusation. I was cold. I was ungrateful. I was betraying my blood. By the 10th call, I turned my phone off. The silence that followed as sweet as a lullaby. I sat back, staring out at the mountains beyond my window, the horizon fading into violet dusk. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, my family was unraveling. Boxes half packed, tears shed, accusations flying. They had spent weeks plotting a future in a house that no longer existed for them. And here I was, in peace, sipping wine. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. But even as warmth spread through me, another sensation crept in. A tightness, a flicker of guilt. Not for Hannah, not for Mike, not even for my parents. For Emma. She hadn't chosen this. She was a pawn in a game she couldn't even understand. The thought gnawed at me as I closed my curtains and shut off the lights. You almost feel bad, a voice in my head whispered. Almost. I pulled the blanket tighter around me and let the silence settle, heavy and final. Because deep down, I knew this was only the opening act. 4 months passed in relative silence, and I allowed myself to believe the storm had finally burned out. My phone no longer rang with furious accusations, and the absence of my family's voices was like a balm on old wounds. In that quiet, I built something new. Daniel, a friend from college who'd also settled in Colorado, had started as just a familiar face in a new city. Coffee dates turned into dinners, dinners into late-night walks, and soon he was spending more nights at my place than his. He was steady where my family had been volatile, kind where they had been manipulative. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not used. By March, the word future no longer scared me. Daniel and I had begun talking about moving in together permanently, even marriage. My life was finally my own. But peace never lasts long in my family. It started with another phone call. Mom's name lit up on the screen like a bad omen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Rachel, she said, her voice falsely cheerful. We've been thinking. Hannah and Mike should move to Colorado too. Imagine how wonderful it would be. Emma could grow up near the mountains, and you have such a big house all to yourself. I nearly dropped the phone. Absolutely not. Rachel, her tone sharpened. Family should be together, and Emma would love the mountains. First of all, I don't live alone anymore. I live with my boyfriend. Second, even if I did live alone, the answer is still no. There was a long pause, then coldly. You got a boyfriend just to keep Hannah's family out of your house, didn't you? I laughed bitterly. Not everything revolves around Hannah. I have a boyfriend because I wanted one. You're insane, she hissed. You've been plotting against us from the beginning. I hung up before the fury in her voice could twist any deeper into me. When I told Daniel, he frowned, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Rachel, this isn't going to stop. You know that, right? I tried to brush it off. They'll get tired eventually. But Daniel didn't look convinced. Maybe we should install that security system we talked about. I laughed at first. The idea of my parents or Hannah driving across states to show up at my door felt absurd. But the laugh died quickly, because wasn't that exactly what they had done before? Shown up at my old house, ready to take possession as if it were theirs. A week later, my phone rang again. This time, not family. My old boss from the city where I'd worked before Colorado. Rachel, I have to tell you something strange. Your mother came by the office today. She was crying, begging for your new address. Said she hadn't been able to reach you for weeks. Thought something terrible happened. My blood ran cold. Please tell me you didn't give it to her. A guilty silence stretched. I did. She seemed genuinely upset. I thought maybe there was an emergency. There's no emergency, I snapped. She's been harassing me for months. I am so sorry, Rachel, I didn't know. I ended the call with trembling hands, my stomach hollow. They knew now. They knew where I was. When I told Daniel, he didn't even hesitate. We're installing the cameras this weekend. And so we did. Motion sensors on every door and window, floodlights with triggers, security cameras covering every angle of the house. Daniel even bought a video doorbell so we could see who was coming before they got close. The following Thursday, Aunt Carol called. Her voice was sweet as honey, but her words curdled it instantly. Rachel, your parents and Hannah are coming to see you this weekend. They bought train tickets. They're worried about you. They think you might be in an abusive relationship. I nearly choked. What? They just want to make sure you're safe. By ambushing me at my home? My voice shook with fury. If they wanted to make sure I was safe, they would have called, not stalked me. Don't be dramatic. They're your family. Family doesn't stalk family, I said through gritted teeth, then hung up. Daniel didn't wait for me to suggest what came next. Pack a bag. We're leaving Friday. By dawn Saturday, we were in a rented cabin high in the mountains, its wood stove crackling, snowflakes brushing against the windows. For a moment, I breathed easy again. Then my phone buzzed. The security app. Someone was at my front door. I opened the feed with shaking hands. And there they were. Mom, Dad, Hannah, Mike, and little Emma, standing on my porch in the freezing air. Dad carried what looked like a toolkit. They knocked for 5 minutes straight. Mom shouted, "Rachel, honey, open up." Then Dad crouched, pulling something thin and metallic from the kit. My blood turned to ice. He was trying to pick the lock. Daniel leaned over my shoulder, his voice low and tight. "This is breaking and entering." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as I watched him fiddle with the lock. Then suddenly the alarm blared. Bright floodlights exploded across the yard. Emma shrieked, clinging to Hannah's coat. Within 10 minutes, 2 police cars screeched into the driveway. Officers stepped out, their lights sweeping across my frozen family. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered. "Hello, is this Rachel Morrison? This is Officer Martinez with the Denver Police Department. We're at your residence with some individuals claiming to be your relatives." "Yes," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. "I can see them on my security cameras. They say you invited them but forgot to leave a key." A humorless laugh escaped me. "Absolutely not. I did not invite them. They've been stalking and harassing me for months, and my father was just attempting to break into my house with lockpicking tools." There was a pause on the line. "So you're saying they're trespassing?" "Yes, 100%. "Understood. We'll take them down to the station." I hung up, staring at the screen as officers handcuffed my parents and led Hannah and Mike toward the patrol cars. Emma was crying, her little face red in the cold. I should have felt relief. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt hollow. Because this was no longer just about a house. It was war. The morning after the break-in, I sat at the cabin's kitchen table, staring into a mug of coffee gone cold. Daniel sat across from me, his hands wrapped around his own cup, watching me carefully, but not speaking. He knew better than to fill the silence. My phone buzzed with messages. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, all variations on the same theme. Family doesn't call the cops on family. Family forgives. Family understands. But none of them mentioned the lockpicks. None of them mentioned the trespassing, the invasion. They'd twisted it already, rewritten the script in their favor. I was the villain now, the ungrateful daughter, the cold-hearted sister. By noon, Aunt Carol's voice was on the line again. "Rachel, your parents are furious. They spent the night in some dingy motel after the police released them. They're saying they're done with you. They don't want you in the family anymore." I let the words wash over me like rain. For a moment, they stung. There's a strange ache that comes when the people who raised you finally slam the door in your face. But then, a lightness crept in, almost like relief. "That's the best news I've heard all year," I said, and hung up. Carol called again weeks later, her voice softer this time. "Hannah and Mike found a new apartment. They're managing. Your parents are still bitter. Don't you miss them, Rachel? Don't you miss your family?" I glanced at Daniel, who was sprawled on the couch, smiling faintly at something on his laptop. He looked up, caught my eye, and gave me a wink. "No," I said firmly. "I don't miss them. My family is here now. Daniel, our friends, people who care about me, not what I can give them." "What about when you get married?" Carol asked, almost pleading. "Won't you want your parents there? Won't you regret it?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath before answering. "Daniel and I are engaged, Carol, and no, I won't regret it. They won't be there. That's my choice." There was a silence on the other end, thick with disapproval. "That's sad." What's sad, I said, my voice steady as stone, is that it took me 32 years to realize DNA doesn't make someone family. Respect does. Love does. And they gave me none of that. Carol didn't call again. The months that followed felt like stepping into a new world. Daniel and I planned a small ceremony. His parents welcomed me, like I'd always been theirs. They offered to walk me down the aisle, and I accepted with a lump in my throat. It was a bittersweet balm, a gesture that healed a wound I hadn't even realized was still bleeding. The wedding day arrived in early summer. The sun lit up the mountains, and the air smelled of pine and wildflowers. As Daniel's parents took me by each arm and led me forward, I felt a quiet strength ripple through me. No guilt, no shadows, just freedom. The ceremony was intimate. Friends, Daniel's family, laughter that rang honest and true. When I looked into Daniel's eyes, I saw not only love, but safety, something I had never known growing up. Afterward, as we stood outside beneath strings of lights, champagne glasses in hand, I felt a strange certainty settle deep in my bones. I had cut the cord. And though part of me had feared regret, none came. Only peace. Weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the front made my stomach twist. Hannah's. I debated throwing it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside was a letter, scrawled in hurried strokes. Rachel, I don't know why you hate me so much. I was just trying to give my family a better life. You didn't have to ruin everything. Emma still cries about the house sometimes. I hope you're happy. You're selfish, but you're still my sister. Maybe one day you'll realize family matters more than pride. At the bottom, a single line softer than the rest. Sometimes I miss you. For a moment, the words clawed at me. Memories of shared childhood bedrooms, whispered secrets before sleep, the way Hannah used to braid my hair when we were kids. But then I remembered her standing in my parents' living room, tears of triumph in her eyes, as she celebrated taking what wasn't hers. I remembered her voice screaming through the phone, accusing me of destroying Emma's life. I folded the letter neatly, carried it to the fireplace, and dropped it in. The paper curled black and red, flames eating the ink until nothing remained but ash. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. What was it? He asked softly. Nothing important, I said, leaning back into him. Just old ashes. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting ties with my family. The answer is simple. No. Not even for a second. My life is peaceful now. I have a husband who loves me, friends who support me, and a home that's truly mine. I don't have to answer to guilt trips or manipulation or people who see me as a resource to be exploited. Hannah and Mike still complain about money. Emma is doing fine in school. My parents remain bitter, spinning their story to anyone who will listen. Their ungrateful daughter abandoned them for no reason. Let them. I know the truth. And sometimes that's enough. Because the most liberating lesson I've ever learned is this. You don't owe anyone access to your life, not even family. Especially not family who only sees you as property to claim.